Right now, you are dead. You just didn't notice. Nobody ever does. In your body, 30 billion cells die every single second. As you listen to these words, the person you were a moment ago no longer exists. Your atoms already belong to others. Your consciousness only calls this you because it remembers the version from a second ago. But memory is not ownership. Death is not an event. Death is a process, and you are already deep inside it. In 1977, biologist Leonard Hayflick made a discovery. Human cells can only divide a limited number of times between 40 and 60 before they stop. This is known as the Hayflick Limit. The telomeres at the ends of your DNA shorten with every division. It's a countdown. Factory setting. But here's what's fascinating. This isn't a flaw. It's by design. Evolution did not choose immortality. It could have. Certain species did. Some jellyfish and hydra can, in theory, live forever. But our species chose death as a feature. Because death is not the garbage disposal of the system, death is the engine. Have you ever wondered why we're still evolving? Why cancer cells can multiply indefinitely while you cannot? Because you are not more important than the future of the species. Your body knows this. Your DNA knows this. Your DNA knows this. Your DNA knows this. The meaning of your life is not to continue living. All of human history is an architectural masterpiece built on the fear of death. Every civilization, every religion, every ideology rests on the same foundation, the promise of delaying death in exchange for obedience. Egyptian pharaohs built pyramids. A Chinese emperor drank mercury. Medieval Europe sold indulgences to cleanse sins. Modern Western society sells health insurance. The product changes. The mechanism stays the same. You're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of losing control. And that fear makes you manageable. In The Denial of Death, Ernest Becker argued that all of human civilization is an elaborate defense mechanism against the awareness of death. Everything you do, every meaning you construct, every goal you chase is ultimately designed to help you forget one single truth: you are temporary. But here's what they won't tell you. This forgetting is not a choice. It's enforced. Society doesn't teach you to avoid thinking about death to protect you. It teaches you to avoid it because the person who thinks about death stops producing, stops consuming, and begins questioning the rules of power. Because in the face of death, no hierarchy survives. Your boss will die. Your president will die. Even your God, if he was born in a human body, died. Death levels all status. That's why the system must constantly postpone, package, and aestheticize the reality of death. Funerals are organized. Makeup is applied to corpses. We say, rest in peace. As if peace were a choice, as if there were still consciousness underground. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and no answer you give will ever fully satisfy you. When did you begin? At the moment you were born, when you first became aware of yourself, when consciousness emerged in the womb, at the moment the sperm met the egg? Or maybe you never began at all. Maybe you were already there. Your atoms were forged in the Big Bang 113.28 billion years ago. The carbon in your body was cooked inside stars that died billions of years before you. You are not a part of the universe. You are not a part of the universe. You are the universe, temporarily configured to say I. Therefore, death is not the end of you. Death is the end of something that never truly existed as a permanent entity in the first place. Does this comfort you, or does it disturb you even more? Because if you were never truly real, then there is nothing to lose. But precisely because of that, there is also nothing to gain. Buddhism said this thousands of years ago. The self is an illusion. What you call I is a temporary assembly of 5 skandhas: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. None of them are permanent. None of them truly belong to you. You are a river. You cannot step into the same river twice, because neither the river nor you remain the same. Heraclitus said it. Jung translated it into psychology. The ego is merely a temporary wave rising on the surface of the collective unconscious. The wave can claim, I am not the ocean, but that doesn't make it right. So what is death? Is it the falling of the wave, or is it the ocean breathing? In the 18th century, French physician Xavier Bichat gave this definition: life is the sum of functions that resist death. It is brutally accurate, yet also profoundly wrong. Because resistance is already an admission of eventual defeat. If life is nothing but resistance to death, then death is always stronger, and in the end, it always wins. Every single time, without exception. But what if death doesn't win? What if death is simply a transition to another set of rules? The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy in the universe always increases. Order flows toward chaos. It is irreversible. Yet according to this law, you are already an anomaly. You are a temporary resistance to entropy. Your body constantly rebuilds order, but it costs energy. And one day, that energy will run out. your body will surrender to the laws of the universe. Is this surrender a defeat, or is it a return? Because if you are already an exception to the universe's rules, then dying simply means returning to the default state. Life is the anomaly. Death is the baseline. Does this unsettle you? It should, because it is the exact opposite of everything you've been told. You were told that life is precious, sacred, and must be protected at all costs. But what is precious is rare, and what is rare is fragile. Life is not valuable because it must be protected. It is valuable because it is fragile. Sigmund Freud introduced the concept of the death drive, thanatos. Alongside the life drive, eros, there exists within us a deep impulse towards self-destruction. Freud found it in the darkest corners of human behavior. Why do people harm themselves? Why do they return to destructive relationships? Why do they start wars and commit collective suicide? Because deep down, at the most fundamental layer of consciousness, there is a desire for an ending, for tension to cease, for the effort to stop, a return to nothingness. Jung interpreted it differently. For him, death was a symbol of transformation. In alchemy, there is the nigredo stage, blackening, decay, death. But from that comes albedo, whitening, purification, rebirth. Death is not the end, it is part of the process. But part of which process? Jung never fully answered that. Perhaps he couldn't, because if death is transformation, what exactly are we transforming into? Soil, energy, memory, or simply absence? And what is absence? Can we even define it? To define something is to give it existence. Absence, once defined, becomes something. So absence is a paradox in itself. In Indian philosophy, there is the concept of shunyata, emptiness. But this emptiness is not nothingness. It is pure potential, the place from which everything arises and to which everything returns. Death is the return to that emptiness. And if emptiness is potential, then death is also potential. What does that mean? I don't know. No one does. But is this not knowing a deficiency, or is it freedom? In the Middle Ages, there was the memento mori tradition. Remember, you will die. Painters drew skulls. Preachers described hell. The wealthy ordered their coffins while still alive. Was this a sadistic obsession or profound wisdom? Perhaps both. Because remembering death does not make life meaningless, it sharpens it. If you live every, the Stoic philosophers said, to think about death is the art of living. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, reminded himself every night, you too will die. Did this make him depressed? No. It freed him. Because the person who accepts death cannot be controlled by fear. Power cannot buy him. Promises cannot deceive him. The one who has already accepted the loss has stepped away from a war he was destined to lose, and only then can he truly begin to live. But the modern world will never tell you this. It says, forget death, stay young, stay healthy, stay productive. The anti-aging industry is worth over $300 billion a year. People erase their wrinkles, take hormone treatments, buy cryotanks. They think they're defeating death. They're not, they're only hiding from it. And hiding makes them even more fragile. Because what you hide grows stronger. Carl Jung said, a person can only become whole by confronting their shadow. The shadow is everything you deny, repress, and refuse to accept about yourself. And death is the greatest shadow. Because death is the reality in which your ego never existed. The ego says, I am. Death says, you never were. The two cannot coexist. But here's the trick. If death has already won, then pretending to fight serves no purpose. If the end is certain, then the meaning lies in the process. Camus put it this way, there is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. If life ends in death, what is the point of living? Camus' answer, there is no inherent point. But this leads not to despair, but to freedom. Because if there is no meaning, you create it. You are the hero. You are the author of your story. And death is simply the final sentence. But does the final sentence devalue the rest of the book? Or does it give the entire book its meaning? I don't know which view is correct. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Quantum physics tells you that a particle exists in superposition, both here and not here, until it is observed. Like Schrödinger's cat, the cat is both alive and dead until the box is opened. Is this just a thought experiment, or is reality truly this fluid? If something remains undetermined until observed, isn't death also undetermined until observed? But who will observe your death? You? You can't, because you'll no longer exist. Others? But does their observation define your reality? Perhaps death only exists in the minds of others. For you, death never actually happens. Because you cannot experience it. Experience requires consciousness, and in death also undetermined until observed. Like lading death. Is this a comfort or a curse? Because if you can never experience death, you can never truly know it is real. Maybe that's why death is so terrifying. It is the unknowable, and humans both fear and are drawn to the unknown. In ancient Greece, there were the Eleusinian mysteries, an initiation ritual. People entered a temple and saw something there. What they saw was never revealed, on penalty of death. But those who completed the ritual were changed. When they returned, they no longer feared death. What did they see? Historians still debate it. Some say hallucinogens were used. Others say it was a profound psychological experience. Some believe they were shown a truth. But which truth? That death is an illusion, or that death is the only reality? Perhaps they are the same thing. Nietzsche declared, "God is dead." And after that, where did humanity search for meaning? In science? In ideologies? In consumption? No. Humanity searched for meaning by forgetting death. Because God had given death meaning. God promised life beyond death. But when God died, death became absolute. And absolute death became absolute. So modern man lives in constant escape, work, consume, entertain, forget. But no escape is ever enough, because death follows. Nietzsche knew this. That's why he proposed the Übermensch, the overman, the one who accepts death and still creates meaning. But how many can achieve that? How many can face meaninglessness and still choose to live? Very few. Because it requires a kind of madness, or a kind of transcendence. What is the nature of time? Physics says time is relative. It speeds up or slows down depending on your velocity. Gravity bends it. Near a black hole, time nearly stops. So time is not absolute. Time is perception. 1 second for you could be a year for someone else. So is death also relative? For you, it may happen in an instant. For outside observers, you may remain dying forever. A person falling into a black hole crosses the event horizon in a moment from their perspective, but to outsiders, they appear frozen there for eternity. So death is both instantaneous and eternal, both existent and non-existent. Which one is real? Both. Neither. Because reality depends on perspective. Perspective depends on the observer. And the observer is consciousness. And what is consciousness? In the 19th century, physician James Young Simpson began using anesthesia. The church opposed it. Pain is God's will. Humans must feel pain. Simpson replied, when God created Adam, he put him to sleep before removing his rib. So God was the first anesthetist. That debate was really about death, because anesthesia is a temporary death. Your consciousness disappears. Time stops. The surgery feels like it lasted a second. Where were you during that time? Nowhere. You simply weren't, then you returned. So is death, like that too. The shutting down of consciousness. And if so, is there pain? Is there fear? Or is there only nothing? Nothing. But nothing cannot be experienced, because experience requires existence. So for you, death can never be experienced. Death is only ever a story told by others. One last thing, perhaps the most disturbing of all. The true meaning of death is its meaninglessness. Death carries no message. It teaches no lesson. It serves no purpose. Death simply happens. And that is what terrifies people most, because meaninglessness cannot be controlled, bargained with, or destroyed. Trying to give death meaning is an attempt to domesticate it. But death cannot be domesticated. Death is wild. Death is nature itself. Perhaps this is why people believe in something after death, heaven, hell, reincarnation, energy transformation. Because the idea that nothing happens is unbearable. But what if the unbearable thing is the truth? What if the thing you must accept is exactly what you cannot bear? The video ends here. But for you, it doesn't. Because right now, as you listen to these words, something has shifted. Maybe just a small thought. But that thought is now part of you. You will carry it forward. The documentary is over. Because the true meaning of death is not a question. It is a shadow. And shadows only exist as long as there is light. You are the light, and your shadow is death. One cannot exist without the other. Now go. Live. Because you have no other choice. Not yet.